So most people don't come to the table with compassion as a lead, empathy as a lead. Unfortunately, in the world today, people feel pretty doggy, and you got to be aggressive. You got to be the alpha dog. I never enjoyed any of that strategy.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Gary Jacobs, also known as the Zen Lobbyist. He's a pioneering voice in reimagining advocacy with authenticity, mindfulness, and compassion at its core. Before we dive in, here are a few things I think you should know about today's guest. Number one, Gary is redefining what it means to influence in Washington. With decades of experience in health policy and government relations, Gary has built trusted relationships across the aisle by leading with empathy and purpose, not pressure. Number two, he's the author of The Zen Lobbyist, Cultivating Influence with Compassion and Clarity. It's a groundbreaking book that blends lessons from yoga and mindfulness with real-world insights from Capitol Hill. His approach distills complex advocacy into the three core principles, which are stillness is strategy, compassion is influence, and gratitude is renewal. And number three, Gary is an educator and mentor shaping the next generation of advocates. From teaching the business of government relations at American University to founding initiatives like Primary Care for America, Gary is inspiring students, policymakers, and citizens alike to democratize access and reimagine how influence works in the 21st century. And I was thrilled that at the beginning of Gary's book, I saw acknowledgments and kind notes from some of the other chief influencers we have interviewed, like Congressman Patrick Kennedy, among others. Gary, you've been called a bridge builder, a reformer, and a mindful leader in a fast-moving world. Today, we're thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Well, I really enjoyed the book, I have to say, and I was really excited to see some familiar names at the front. You know, to start off, I know you've built your career as a trusted voice in health policy and in government relations. What first drew you to lobbying, but then what inspired you to reimagine it through a Zen lens?
Pretty easy for me to do this. Thank you for asking. The story really was understanding advocacy and then the tools to use advocacy and parallel it with influence as we know it in Washington, but do it in my way, which couldn't be pressure, couldn't be caught up in the chaos, had to be more around the concept of if I am an authentic human being with a purpose in my objective approach to educating you, then I can do three things. I can advocate, communicate, and educate any policymaker about the issues that first I have to believe in the issues, and then I can advance them. So that was my approach to it.
Can you
Talk more about it?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, could you share a little bit more just about your own personal story? Because certainly you've had personal experiences that really made you an even stronger and more authentic advocate for changes in health policy.
So the honest truth is you really don't know who you are as you're getting to that point in your life where you're very focused on creating a family, on finding work, and deciding what path you're going to choose, right? You go through the motions based on the past influences in your life, but to know who you really are takes an awful lot of work. I, like most, neglected to do that work. As I began my career, I was in DC, finishing graduate school at American University, and then started working immediately for two national trade associations. Enjoyed a great deal what I was doing, but realized that if I kept doing that work, I was going to be a Washington guy with uh, very little knowledge of the real world other than through the lens of the Beltway. And something in me was saying, you need to go, kind of like Kevin Costner in, you know, in his wonderful movie about finding baseball, but really about I needed to go somewhere else to kind of really find and clear up in my head what my message would be and what my approach to living would be. Somehow I landed up in South Florida through a federal grant given out in the that was evolved out of the HMO Act of 1973, I believe. 73, yeah. And through that, there was money available to go to local communities and begin HMOs, which sounds ridiculous now, but that was the public policy under President Nixon to begin to bring competition into local communities with an alternative to fee for service healthcare. And as I did that, I really realized that I could learn to be an advocate because I had to. No one really wanted me to be there initially. And doctors were very happy with the way things were. And I had to educate again, communicate well, and then advocate. Started the Florida Association of ACOs and really began to understand the dynamic between public policy and business opportunity and honed my skills to live in that world. And that's really where most of my career has happened.
You had kind of a field of dreams moment, it sounds like.
A moment. I love that. Yeah. Thank you.
So in your book, The Zen Lobbyist, you define 3 guiding principles. Stillness is strategy, compassion is influence, and gratitude is renewal. And of course, these are probably not the principles that one would expect picking up a book about, government relations. So really kind of brings a new perspective to it. Can you walk us through how each of those principles shows up in your work, in your life, and sort of what that means for folks who are trying to influence policy for the better?
Critical. And I'm very happy to codify those 3 principles into what I call the mindful edge. And I'm beginning to develop curriculum around those 3 principles and to teach the mindful edge as a program from a coaching perspective and in my work at American. So let me happily answer that question. So you see the chaos of everyday work in Washington, D.C., and probably in the last year and a half, good or bad, chaos has been very dominant in the mind of everybody trying to advocate any kind of legislative proposals or any kind of new programs or models. So I kind of went back to my roots and I had a parallel course where I was evolving myself. And as I describe in the book, and you now know well, I had some healthcare challenges that most people maybe don't have to the extreme that I had, but had some issues with anxiety dominating my life, moving towards panic attacks, some blood clot issues that led to a blood disease that I learned about, didn't know before, and then eventually a stroke, which thank God turned out to be okay at the end and a good learning lesson. But those sentinel events in my life taught me that that first of all, the chaos was not a great place to ruminate thoughts, ideas, and approaches to anything. So the idea of finding stillness as a strategy became critical to me. My choice is meditation, which I do every morning. As soon as I wake up, I have like a little ritual, and I move to a space, I meditate, do some yoga stretching, and off to my daily activities. So stillness is the place to begin because it gives you the opportunity to evolve your thinking and strategy for your day, moment by moment, in what you're going to do. The second part, which we'll hopefully deal a little further later in, is the idea of influence and compassion as influence. So most people don't come to the table with compassion as a lead, empathy as a lead. Unfortunately, in the world today, people feel pretty doggy doggy, and you got to be aggressive. You got to be the alpha dog. I never enjoyed any of that strategy. And as I was evolving in my personal thinking, in my yoga meditation, mindful practices, I said, why can't I adopt them to the work I do as well? And it hit me one moment as I was beginning to write the book that there was a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance when
Great
I
book.
was a young man, right? When I was in college, I guess. But what was interesting about that book was that it had very little to do with motorcycle maintenance. It really had to do with a dad and a son traveling the US on motorcycles and the dynamic and interplay between them that led to mindful practices and a better relationship between them. So I practice that. I have three sons that remind me every day that dad, that stuff you taught us when we were kids, now we use in our everyday life. I go to work and I take a breath before I go into a situation that could be uncomfortable, and I'm okay with it. And those principles became very important in their lives, which to me is my legacy of anything. And then the last piece is gratitude is renewal is critical because to be grateful in anything you do and to be appreciative of someone else or something else is something we neglect so often. Just even writing a little note. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about my book and talk to you and get to know you one on one is a privilege, right? And I want to be able to understand gratitude in a way that enriches my life every day. And when you think about it, it renews you. And in healthcare, the idea of renewal is critical because we have burnout, we have shortages, and we need strategies to figure out how to keep good people doing this good work and to make sure that every day you feel the enthusiasm, the excitement, the energy of pushing forward and moving the whole ball forward. So that's in essence what I'm trying to talk to people about, and it works in everyday life.
I love
People
that.
that you wouldn't think it, people that you would not think would respond, do, and, I mean, I'm friends now with people that share committees of jurisdiction in healthcare in the House and in the Senate that I would never imagine I would have been friends with. But getting to know people one on one and demonstrating not as a act, but as a part of your truth, authenticity, the idea of being compassionate, understanding about their issues personally, as well as them understanding my issues, listening to me listening to them. It's so much more effective and efficient than saying I can raise $20,000 for you
Yeah.
and get your clients to give money to advance your relationship with a person. That's superficial to me. And I want to be real. I want to speak and truth to power is real to me.
Gary, so much of what you're saying resonates with me, and I'm sure resonates with those folks who are listening in. Um, on the gratitude
Hopefully.
front, I mean, just with you, I just think it's such a powerful force for ourselves, but also for those we interact with, like you described with, sort of the folks that you're building relationships with. And I think in such a tech-driven world, building those people-to-people connections at a level of authenticity, It's always been important, but boy, is it more important than ever.
I think we forgot about it, you know?
Yeah.
I do some exercises in the book, which you probably, hopefully, you've done a
Yeah.
couple of
End of
them,
each chapter. I love those.
and it reminds you of who you really are and that you really can reinvent yourself in every moment of your life. Kind of like playing golf and taking the next shot. Tennis, it was a bad shot. Now I got to take a better shot. But life is moment by moment. It's not the holistic. I used to go into meetings. I used to have to strategize and make sure everybody had their part down. And the moment I came back from my first major yoga retreat, which I describe in the book with Deepak Chopra, um, I said, We're stopping this altogether. We're not preparing inside out to understand the issue. We have to understand what we're talking about clearly, but we can't script people's reactions to
Yeah.
what we're going to talk to them about. And the moment I stopped doing that, things seem to fall into place much easier and much more efficiently.
I love.
And people were kinder, gentler, and real.
Yeah. Well, another thing that just struck me as you were speaking about kind of the first component, stillness as strategy and just the mindful edge, is I know that a lot of professional sports teams, for example, now have experts and coaches who work with them on exactly what you're talking about. And these are, the most competitive people and I mean, athletics, obviously, staying at the top of your game. I mean, going back to our baseball theme is so difficult. And why not take that same advantage, that same edge, and
I
bring it
started
in?
to understand that in sports with my mindful practices and and meeting and learning about John Kabat-Zinn and his work, because a lot of the folks in Boston started using from the insight meditation programs and from John's work at University of Massachusetts to put into practice mindfulness as a clinical strategy and tool. And people were releasing from the pain they had, chronic pain, not by medication, but through mindfulness and being aware of it and being able to move it aside like a thought in meditation comes, let it go, and then move on. But it then moved into sports, and Chicago Bulls will tell you, I mean, the, the coach Phil was amazing, bringing mindful practices to that and to use it as a strategy with a very difficult team of highly professional individuals, right? Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, bring them all together and using meditation and using the same strategy in Los Angeles with those big personalities.
Yeah.
But this strategy disarms you very quickly because you realize it's not about my shot's longer than yours or um, I'm the guy and you're not. It's nothing about that. That's all, that can leave tomorrow. We learn in DC pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
That you're not the you're not the position, you're in the position, and then you won't be in that position. So what people will remember is you as a human being. And were you kind? Were you gentle? Were you caring? Or were you just an arrogant, whatever,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what I remember.
Yeah. Absolutely right. I want to maybe say a little bit more or hear a little bit more about one of your other principles, compassion is influence. I mean, I think that's a very powerful reframing of what influence can mean in Washington and obviously around issues like healthcare. Compassion is such an important component because we've all had our own challenges and of course those around us. But what does compassion look like in a world that's so driven by competition and urgency? Can you just dive into that a little more for us?
To advance your advocacy position, you can choose many paths in Washington, right? A lot of people focus on money. I can raise money for you. and therefore you'll listen to me. To me, that is a means to an end, but it's not a long-lasting, purposeful, purpose-driven approach to relationship building. To me, it's got to be authentic, it's got to be real, and everybody has their own story. Everybody has a part of their reality that they may not want to talk about because they fear you'll look different at them, or I'll know something about you that will all of a sudden color my view of you. That's you are not that action, or you are not that whatever it might be. Um, you are deep inside based in love. And if we begin with love, that everything can evolve from that, because I can look at you in a more loving way, be gentler and kinder to you, and care about you genuinely than just making it transactional. It's kind of like fee for service healthcare. I go into a doctor because I have a cold, and they look at my throat, they look at my ears, they listen to my breathing, and give me medication and say, you'll be better, right? If I don't know that doctor, it's just a transaction. I'm paying for that visit. To me, it's got to be about a longitudinal, long term relationship with my provider. And in my view, primary care providers own that space, should stand up and advocate and advance it. I think we did pretty good in the last fee rule, the last physician fee schedule rule, in getting more money to primary care, because it is the linchpin of the whole system. And it's why I advocated on behalf of the American Academy of Family Physicians and other like-minded groups that we needed to focus on bringing primary care to all Americans as a baseline to enter the healthcare system. If you enter it through transactions with only urgent care or ER or specialists who then direct you to their world, you kind of lose your grounding in where you begin. And beginning is with primary care, knowing your family, knowing you, knowing that if my blood pressure is elevated on Monday morning, not to be freaked out about it because I ate Chinese food on Sunday and it had a lot of sodium in it. And that's what I do with my mom or dad every Sunday. And my doctor knows that because they know me, they care about me. And, I write extensively about those relationships growing up and what it was like for me.
Yeah. And I want to talk a bit more about the whole primary care focus that you have in a minute. Let me just kind of ask just one more question before we move on. You mentioned love, and you've also talked about mindfulness, obviously, which we've been discussing. Those are not words most people associate with Washington. Gary, have you encountered skepticism when bringing the concept of mindfulness into Washington? And if so, how do you handle it?
So I am what I am, right? And I begin there. And if you're going to react in any negative way against that, I have to back off, because if I'm trying to advocate on your, you know, uh, around a particular issue, and you're all about, well, I'm chairman of blah, blah, blah committee, and this is the way I do it. And I grew up in, this, and the way my high school was this. And that's how my dad was, whatever. And this is why I am the way I am. I, in my mind, can break that down immediately and say, do you really know, to myself, does he really know who he is? I don't think so. I think the bravado, I think the aggressiveness is what he uses to defend this notion of ego. And ego is what you become in the world that you travel in every day, right? It's an accumulation of all your learnings from your parents, from your siblings, from your teachers, from the religious people in your life, and that becomes who you think you really are. But if you break it down and begin to go deeper and say, who am I? And you see there's an exercise in the book that I do right from the back, from the beginning to kind of break this down for people. But if once you do that and you begin to realize that I'm not the sum of all the experiences I had, but I am this beautiful light that can shine on the world if I'm given the opportunity. And my gosh, being in Washington, D.C., advancing policy, and I could shine a light in on this behavior and then use it in my everyday practice. How lucky am I as a being to be able to bring that to people? So you want to think it's negative, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. As long as at the end of the day our batting averages are beyond the norm, I'm happy with that. And really that's what life should be. I mean, because if you get, and like a great example is, do you forgive? If you don't forgive, and I'm walking down the street and I say, hey, you look really tired today. You okay? Everything all right? Now you're going to spend the afternoon since I saw you saying, oh my God, do I really look bad? Am I tired? Of what's going on here? But honestly, that's not your problem. That becomes my problem because I'm now telling my significant other, my friends, boy, he looked really tired today, blah, blah, blah. Hope he's all right. But honestly, forgiving is such a part of love that if I go into a situation and say, well, you voted against what I wanted, so I'm not sure we should support you anymore, that's really not the answer. Maybe for that issue, that's what you had to do. But now is another day. It's another moment. It's another opportunity for you and I to develop our own relationship, undefined, and we can clear the road together what it looks like.
Absolutely. Love that
And
perspective.
what a way to live your life that way, right?
Absolutely. Much better. Much better way. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. I want to switch a little bit to the policy side. Gary,
Sure.
I mean, you've been at the forefront of healthcare transformation. You described a bit of it, but, from the early days of value-based care.
Now, like Forrest Gump, I've been there all the time.
Right. I love that. Forrest Gump. Yeah, I mean, from the early days of value-based care to founding the primary care for America. And I wonder if you could just talk about some of the wins along the way where influence has, led to policy changes, some of the areas where you haven't gotten to where you'd like to be, and sort of what you're advocating for going forward. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Forrest Gump journey. You've been present at pivotal moments in healthcare over that career. And so I just love to kind of hear a little bit about that, and where has your and others' influence made an impact, and where do you hope your influence and that of others will make an impact going forward?
So let me begin by saying I have been there in sentinel events. The HMO Act in 1973 was a moment in time when I saw the collection of influences from some of the brands like Kaiser Permanente, like Group Health Cooperative in DC, like Group Health Cooperative in Puget Sound. All these entities had some common characteristics that, when put together, had principles like prepayment. Pretty cool idea. A network of providers, employed providers or members of a network. Just characteristics that together became called health maintenance organizations. And oddly enough, there was a grant given to Group Health Association of America, which was the trade association for these early stage HMO activities. And I happened to have my second job, which is in Washington. And I remember I was very excited because now I was making $20,000,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of money in that time in my life. I just graduated school. My parents said, "What are you doing getting a master's in public policy, public administration? How is that relevant to anything?" Because people did not know. So my greatest joy, by the way, is teaching at American, where I went to school, that the business of government relations is a business, and it's an amazing career if you choose it. And honestly, there's very little academic programs in the country today that teach you how to do government relations. You kind of learn it on the job. You learn it by working for a member of Congress and then going into the private sector to go to a lobbying shop. But honestly, there are fundamentals that people can learn. What is a political action committee? How is it used? Why is it used? Is it good? Is it bad? All of those pieces. Writing policy, getting it into a law, what's regulations role to policy, all of those nuances, pieces are in different programs, but not collectively into one program. So at American, we were able to offer that this summer, and I was so excited to be able to teach people about programs like that. But to your point, let's go back there. I think the greatest win um, was keeping the private marketplace intact during the Affordable Care Act. I was very involved working for a company called Universal American, and we owned several insurance companies. And I remember meeting with Tom Scully, who was Tom was the director of CMS at the time. And I was introduced to him, and then we kind of became fast friends after a while. And he was teaching me that Medicare supplement policies providing first dollar coverage was a bad thing in the ability to control costs, and that he was coming up with what was going to be called Part D and Part C to Medicare, which would be revolutionary in creating Medicare Advantage as a program in Part C, and in Part D, creating a drug benefit first time in Medicare. And oh my God, that was going to come from a Republican president. But Tom focused on me in that moment in time because we had about 750,000 beneficiaries in different Medigap programs. And he thought that was a great audience to move to this kind of model. So I love being part of the MMA and working through that. I think my biggest challenge was the Balanced Budget Act back in the 90s, when it was the first time the alternative to fee-for-service and Mid-Sup and all these programs was under attack, and that Medicare Plus Choice, which was a predecessor to Medicare Advantage, which was first taking risks for a population of seniors, and it being in South Florida, that was a big, big deal to me and to us. And then became nationwide after that. Being able to, promote a policy like that, keep it on the books, create the Florida Association of HMOs to advance it in Florida, and then to advance it nationally. And that's how I landed up getting early involved and then building out an HMO in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Who would think that that would be a path towards my journey? But it was a wise decision in retrospect, because most decisions were 50-50. Is that a good decision, a bad decision? But at least I made a decision, right? Some people get paralyzed in even making a decision. But I learned early that making decisions and then course correcting was a strategy, and I embraced it. So in that moment, I was able to take federal money, prove the feasibility of the effort, and then get federal money to put that program together. And then, if you can believe it, get federal loans to underwrite the cost of the program as we went live. And then President Reagan came in and he said, you know what? We have these things called HMOs all over California. Why should the federal government fund these when the private sector is totally capable of doing it itself? And that little switch of policy, which initially we fought, obviously, um, turned me from being a social entrepreneur to becoming a business guy in that moment of healthcare because we had to raise outside capital. You can go to a bank, but they didn't understand what I was talking about. So I landed up meeting a group of people from Nashville, Tennessee, which, as you know, becomes a really big hub for not just music, but healthcare entrepreneurship. And I learned the ropes of entrepreneurship from these people I sold our nonprofit to, and eventually it became a public company. Not knowing anything about public companies, I learned an awful lot. Had all of a sudden a balance sheet that reflected dollars. My dad was so excited. I'm going, Dad, what are you excited? I didn't know how this, I didn't do this on purpose. It evolves. But, so the life you take is, wind back and forth, wind back and forth. But decisions you make, if they're based in love and truth and honesty and authenticity, it's hard to go wrong in my view.
Yeah. Great.
Hopefully that answers.
I love that. Well, as we kind of come to a close today, Gary, I want to ask you a question that we try to ask all our guests, which is, how do you define influence today? And I'm especially interested in how that definition has evolved for you as you've grown in your career, which has been an incredible winding road, and also as you've expanded in your own mindfulness practice. So how do you define influence today?
So the Beatles' Long and Winding Road, I refer in the book to what a long, strange trip it's been, and the Grateful Dead, which is kind of what I grew up with, loving. But to me, my view of influence isn't about just the money. Money is a part of it. Washington is based in money. A lot of influence is bought and sold through different mechanisms. We have political action committees. We have rules around them. Listen to those rules. They're very important. But it's a PAC to me is entree to the decision maker, to the policymaker. Going to a dinner with a congressperson on a committee of jurisdiction that you want to meet and you want to get to know a little bit is critical to be successful in this town. So to me, I've always had a PAC, and I've made it very personal because I had to go to our employees and ask them for money. And it's not easy to ask people you work with for money to advance your agenda in Washington, but that's the way the rules are, and that's made it very personal to me. So it's very easy, honestly, to be able to go, look, y'all, if you believe in the mission of what we're doing as a company, part of that mission means we have to get our word out in Washington, and this is how we do it, explain it to them, and then ask them for it, and then spend it wisely and not delegate it to hired guns, but to do it with your team of people that represent the people you got the money from as an entree point to develop a relationship. Because once I can develop a relationship with an office, with a chief of staff, with a member, I know that they'll listen to me over time. Members' influence to me is also members have a lot on their plate and they have a lot of policy decisions they have to make, right? They don't know a lot about all these issues. And my job is to educate them in a meaningful way that they trust me. They know that I'm being direct and honest with them and that they have my cell phone and they'll call me when a vote comes and they'll say, I don't know. Do I, can you, I don't want you to tell me how to vote, which I really would like to tell them how to vote, but I can't. But I can say, I can give you the facts. I can lay them out for you. You have to make the decision. During the Affordable Care Act, honestly, I must have got 3 to 5 phone calls before that final vote. And a lot of the Democrats that had to make really hard decisions lost their seats in Congress because of those decisions. And some of them had called me before the vote and they had a moment of conscience that said, I can't or I can support this or that, whatever it was procedurally. And I could just give them my opinion, but if they didn't trust me, if I wasn't real and authentic, and how are they going to get the information without talking to people like me? So if I'm for hire and you're just buying services and paying me 20 grand a month to be your advocate, how genuine is that at the end of the day? I think we have to democratize lobbying in a totally different way. There's so much information available now, real time and available in so many ways, like podcasts and, real time information through everything you can imagine on the internet, right? So why not be the guy that helps people understand that information so they can make the best decisions? I put out front that I'm trying to advance primary care. I'm trying to advance value-based care, which is to me outcomes-based reimbursement. It's not just about a buzzword, value-based care. It's really about paying differently by managing a population of people through primary care and then navigating them through the complexity of our healthcare system by referring to the right doctors that they need, by not unnecessarily putting them in hospitals because there's an incentive in some way for you, but to really, destroy the myths of what is and what could be, and then trying to shed light on that. Shedding light on the truth can never steer you wrong, but your own truth is where I think it all begins. And how I bring that to my work is the way I individualized and why I believe the mindful edge with the three-legged stool is the path forward. Thank you for letting me talk to you about that.
I love it. Well, what a great conversation, and a conversation that, again, is not one might expect to have, combining kind of influence in Washington with this concept of mindfulness. But I think you gave us, just so much to think about and reflect on when it comes to what influence means today. Sort of closed talking about the truth, and sort of your own truth is really important, and that listening to yourself before you try to influence others. I think that's a really important reflection. And as we think about sort of the mindful edge and what you shared in your book, The Zen Lobbyist, which I hope everyone will pick up, I just want to kind of close with a reminder of the 3 guiding principles that are things that people may not have thought about when it comes to influence, but that are really powerful. Stillness as strategy, compassion as influence, gratitude as renewal, and these being a different way to look at influence lessons from your career in advocacy and influence in healthcare, and also your personal life story that has sort of dovetailed with that. So thank you, Gary Jacobs, the Zen Lobbyist, for sharing with us today. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.